We're really trying to make the ball tumble a little bit more, and it goes high. So now the hook phase has started too soon, encounter too much friction, ball hooks high. Now I think a lot of the difference why less rotation might hook so much more is because we're talking on a house shot. A lot of volume left of us, not a lot of volume to the right of us, for a right hander, that is. So rotation test on Stockholm. Back to that 60 degrees. We move to the right again. Keep that at 60. Hits the pocket. It goes up to 75. Now in the house shot, we can go from 60 all the way to 90. But now on Stockholm, that extra bit of rotation now makes the ball go too long. The lane's just too short. You know, if you could add 2 feet to the lane, this ball would probably come back and hit the pocket and be just fine. But lane's only 60 feet, so now having that extra bit of rotation, a little more side roll, has created too much length. So let's go to the other side, 45 degrees. Now to me that looks pretty good. Smoother transition, smoother ball motion, ball still going through the pins. Let's try 35 degrees. 35 degrees. Wow, so now we've gone from 60, and we don't really have much room going above 60, but now we have room going the other way. Which if you think about it, makes sense. On a shorter pattern, you want the ball to tumble more end over end. So we don't, you know, the lane's drier down there. We don't need to really help the ball change directions. And that's kind of what this was showing. Then we go down to 25, and now we just don't have enough rotation to make it kind of finish up. There's not enough rotation on the ball. We were giving it a little bit of room. We weren't playing dead up the lane because 60 degrees of rotation, we needed to get it away from the pocket. So now 25 is too less. So rotation of Athens, 60 degrees again. Going through the pins, 75 degrees, too long. So once again, much like Stockholm, just going up 15 degrees, now the ball is going too far down the lane. For this particular ball, playing this particular part of the lane. Go down to 45. It actually gets to the pocket, but now it goes light. The amount of angle that we had to play through the front part of the lane, there's not enough rotation there to bring it back. It still gets to the pocket, but pretty much I can tell a little bit less rotation or not getting to the pocket. So we have from 60 to 45. And lastly, London. We'll go back to the 60. I'll try 75. Pretty much all the same. You're seeing a theme here with rotation on the sport patterns. Go down to 35. That ball actually looks pretty good going through the pins. There's more volume. The ball's retaining axis rotation a little longer. Still has a little more energy left at the pins. So there's 25. Once again, just a little too less rotation. The ball's spinning in the same direction as traveling a little too much. Not enough side rotation. So the rotation graph, in terms of summary of rotation. So house shot now all of a sudden takes the biggest preference. Stockholm was next. Athens actually had the least, which any of you guys who bowled on the medium length WTBA patterns can know they can be really tricky. You have to be pretty accurate to be able to do things all the same. You don't really have much operator error in terms of the variables you can park to the ball. And then London's a little more, but still much less than house shot. And you can see Stockholm is still up there. So RPM test, go back to that house shot. Now our base was 375. We'll go up to 400. Goes to the pin. So just going up 25 RPMs now made the ball read the lane sooner. Look earlier, go high on the head pin. Down to 325. Still got to the pocket. Didn't exactly go through the pins like a warrior, but still got to the pocket. And down to 300. Now we finally got it to go light. So we can change it from 375 down to 325. So 50 RPMs. Now RPMs is really, I know, I got into the little half thing that was happening last night. I got in a little late, but Carolyn was mentioning that at the gold thing that we had last night, a lot of the gold coaches were talking about ball fit. And one of the biggest problems that you have out there is ball fit. Ball fit is going to make its biggest difference in terms of being able to repeat the same RPMs from shot to shot. Ball doesn't fit properly, it's hard to expect the hand to come out of the ball the same way and repeat the same RPMs from shot to shot. So if you see somebody that struggles really repeating RPMs from shot to shot, good chance, take a look at their ball fit, see how it fits. Their RPM test for Stockholm, there's that 375. Now because with the rotation test, 45 degrees looks so good. 60 degrees was a little too long. I actually changed that base to 45. So we're no longer at 60 degrees as a base. We're now at 45 degrees because it just looked like it could strike for days. And once again, it looks like it can strike for days. So I go up to 400, and all of a sudden, even just a couple shots in, that ball is just starting too much. So that extra 25 RPMs, even though it doesn't seem like all that much, it's making the ball reach the lane sooner, making that hook too much. 325 gets to the pocket, doesn't go through the pins quite as well. And even down to 300. Still gets to the pocket, goes to the pins a little bit worse. So now, Stockholm, we have a wider range than we even had a house shot in terms of RPM. Athens, back to that 375, up to 400. Once again, goes through the face. Down to 325. Ball doesn't go through the pins quite as well, but still gets to the pocket. And then down to 300. Now we've gone too far again. We've made that ratio a little wider. The ball's not spinning as fast, not getting into the hook phase as quick, not covering as much overall motion left or right. And lastly, London. So 375 back to the base. You can see that's really high flush. So once again, we kind of knew that 400 wasn't going to get to the pocket. So that should mean that going less would get to the pocket. The range is still going to stay the same. We're just pretty much at the max range that we could for being lined up like this. And sure enough, London went high. So 325, all of a sudden that's not enough. So now we only have a 50-degree difference on London. We have to be really tight with how our release ratio is in our window. So RPM summary graph. So once again, we're seeing a trend that house shot and Stockholm tend to be the highest in all the variables. So Athens was actually the same in terms of RPM, but only 50. So overall, out of all the variables that you kind of had to be the most specific on, RPM tended to be it, which it kind of proves why the ball fit is so important. Because you have to be pretty much spot on with what your RPMs are. You can't be fluctuating all that much operator error, because this is taking into account that we're going to repeat the same shot as well. We're not talking about operator repeater error. We're talking about just operator error of the variables that we're imparting. So the last test that we did was with tilt. So 17 degrees, and this is pretty cool, in my opinion. 10 degrees of tilt, so we lower it. So we got to the pocket, but you can see it start a little sooner. So by us lowering the tilt, we've actually made the ball spin at a faster rate of speed. We haven't changed the RPMs, but the spin speed of the bowling ball is moving faster because we've lowered the tilt. It's covering more track circumference per rotation. And then down to 3 degrees, and then too much. So 10, we tripped to 4, so I knew 3 wasn't going to be there. So let's go to the other side, go to 24. So 24 still gets there, but you can see it goes longer. It doesn't go through the pins quite as well. And even 30. So what does 30 do? Wow. So 30 gets to the pocket. You know, there's so much friction to the right on a house shot that it doesn't take as much effort for the ball to really get started. So Stockholm, 17 degrees. Goes light swisher. We go down to 10 degrees. Ball kind of hits weak. So if we had 17 degrees and the ball looked like it went to the pins pretty good, and then we decrease it to 10, we've lowered that ratio. So more than likely, we've now made the ball kind of stop. We've had it be dead on arrival. The ball's getting into the roll phase a little too soon. Just doesn't have enough power left at the pins. It's happening a little too early. And then up to 24, and we try to go up to 30. And then finally, we reached our limit. So Athens, go back to hitting flush with 17, go up to 24, and we still go, but now we've reached our limit of where we can go. Any higher, we're not going to get there. And down to 10, and it goes high. Just by changing from 17 to 10, that ball read the lane a couple feet sooner, now goes through the face, as opposed to going flush. And lastly, the tilt on London. 17 degrees, go up to 24, up to 30, and that's when we finally reached our limit. So we go all the way up to 24, now we go all the way down to 3. And that still gets to the pocket. Now I was not expecting that result, so much so that we ran the lanes and did it all over again. Because I didn't think that was going to be the result. To have on London, what you would think is a longer pattern, that you could change the tilt that much and still get to the pocket. But back-to-back times, that was the exact result. So I'm taking Earl's word for it. So lastly, the summary graph on tilt. You see London actually almost an outlier here. Not really sure why that happened, but the data says it happened, so I'm going to share it. And then house shot had the most range of tilt. Stockholm was next, and then Athens was the least. So I know that was a lot of video, but I thought it'd be good just to see what it did in terms of motion, as opposed to me just coming up here and showing you the graphs. So the last couple graphs we have here, the variance summary. So the 4 different variables are on the bottom. So speed, rotation, RPM, and tilt. Now if you look, it actually looks like Stockholm. You have the most variance of speed, the second most of rotation, the most of RPMs, and third most of tilt. So you actually have quite a wide range on a short pattern to make mistakes at the pan. Now once again, we're not talking about operator error in terms of repeatability, but we're just talking about the things that you can do with your hand. You have a pretty wide range to be able to still hit the pocket on the short pattern. And then house shot is next. So you can see house shot is pretty much towards the top of every one there is. Well, that kind of makes sense. House shot is easier. So not only do we have the left to right variance or the shot repeatability inconsistencies that we can get away with. We all know you can kind of throw it wherever you want on a house shot. Hook to the right, oil in the middle. But not only do we have that inconsistencies, but we can also be inconsistent with what we're doing with our release. So we have sort of the best of both worlds. Kind of shows you why people can average 250 or 260 on the really, really easy lane conditions. And then Athens and London are almost sort of side by side. So almost the longer the pattern gets, the more you have to be consistent with the variables that you impart to a bowling ball. That's kind of the summary variance. So what we learn out of the presentation is really the power of changing that. Versatility can create drastic changes in motion. We're big in the training center of being able to be versatile, being able to change your rotation, being able to change your RPM, being able to change your speed, being able to do those things. So you can create so many different ball motions with all that same one bowling ball. You can make that hook phase earlier, hook phase later, get the roll phase to start. Anything you want. Secondly is recognition of the proper phases can lead to a wider margin of error. Basically what the release ratio is there for. You have a wide room for error. All you bowlers know out there that if your ball's doing the right thing on the lane, you feel like you have much more room. You can stay loose, you can repeat shots better. All of a sudden your ball starts doing things you don't like, you get tight, you get tense, all of a sudden the shot repeatability goes down, and then bad things happen. Generally the scores don't go up. And then lastly is that the players really don't have to be perfect just to control the pocket. That's one thing. Really preach to the players that, hey, you can be a little off in different variables that you achieve. But just keep in mind that we want to also make the ball go through the pins the right way. So my last slide is, obviously we get a lot of knowledge out there. And knowledge is power. That's one thing that people say all the time. And, you can learn lots of things through knowledge, and I feel like everybody needs to learn through knowledge. But a quote that I learned recently, that Rod's going to start to laugh, he doesn't know I have this in here. But a quote that I learned, I love the quote, I think it's just perfect, because it really shows that, knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Okay? But wisdom is knowing not to put it in fruit salad. So you can have all this knowledge in the world, but if you don't know how to use those tools, use the toolboxes, and go home and practice and watch ball motion, and teach your players and learn from your players, and constantly, put it in terms so you can make the right decisions for your players, so they're going to be better suited to bowl better, score higher, win medals, win collegiate national championships, whatever your goal is for your player, team, or what have you. So, thank you very much for your time. I appreciate it.
Okay, we have a couple of handouts that we want to kind of give you, kind of summary we want to describe what it is, Brian. There were some questions. Did someone have a question? Okay.
Nowadays, when you enter a bowling center or you go to the championship, you have to rate your ball. If you have a digital machine, you rate the ball in 2 seconds. You can read all the factors that make the ball valid. So you don't have to turn the ball upside down, etc. So very easy. machine equipment measure the ball. If you go to a bowling center, nowadays, you can easily read the speed on monitor. Most of them have that software. But what about the rotation, the RPM, and the tilt?
Am I still on?
Yeah.
Well, speed, yeah. I mean, one thing to know is that when you generally see the speed on the monitors in bowling centers, that's taking the ball speed well down the lane. You know, the speed gate, whatever you want to call it, that they track so they can put that up on the scoring monitor is down by where the camera they take so they can see how many pins are left. So the ball is generally going to lose 3 miles per hour. It can depend on what you're bowling on. If you're bowling on more friction, the ball's going to lose more speed. It's actually going to be slower. You know, it's amazing. You can throw the ball feel like the same speed. You throw your strike ball, and then you throw your spare shot, and your spare shot instantly reads a mile per hour faster. So you didn't throw it a mile per hour faster, but because the ball's not slowing down, then it reads at a faster rate of speed. So take that into consideration when you're looking at the speed. In terms of rotation and tilt, you need to find the bowler's positive axis point in order to measure that. You know, from track circumference, you circle the initial ball ring and measure from the diameter of the track circumference in order to get how much tilt the player has. If you happen to have an armadillo, it's kind of a cheater way to do it, a lot quicker. And then rotation, once again, you need video pretty much to see it. So take release video, look at the direction where that TAP is in terms of clock, 90 degrees being straight back at you, 0 degrees being turned to the left wall. There's lots of documentation out there about how to go about doing that, what you're looking for to get the degrees.
But when you're competing too, the more coach you can develop your eye, you can actually see whether it's a low tilt, a medium tilt, or a high tilt, high rotation, medium rotation, low rotation, high RPM, medium. The more you start doing, the more you can do it.
Yeah, it's not necessarily about, well, that was 60 degrees and that was 65. You know, so well, that's high, that was medium. You know, having players that can change that is just, you know, obviously helps everyone. That helps the team, player, everybody involved.
Who else had a question?
Hi, Brian. The big question for me is, in trying to make that formula, you're adding tilt into RPMs, and you said it was something that you had, but we really can't do the formula if we don't know the version of tilt.
Yeah, it's a formula that the Specs and Research Department got for us. It's just a way to convert RPM into miles per hour. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, what we do is you convert your tilt to circumference.
What kind of
Okay, whether you're covering 22 inches, 24 inches, and everything like that. And since you're covering that much at the RPM and the speed, you can actually figure out how fast that part of the ball is actually traveling. So what you're trying to measure is how fast is that part of the ball traveling as it spins. Okay, so 27 inches is going to be 0 degrees. So it's going to be the circumference. So what you're doing is looking at that inch. So how many inches is it traveling? It can be done.
Can we just get a fix, please?
We'll see what we can do for you there. Who else had a question? Okay? Oh, wait, one more.
You know, looking from the back of where the ball finished at the back of the line. Well, we looked at from what do we need to do at the front end to make it finish where we want it to finish.
Yeah.
Instead of a lot of the formulas that we're looking at, what do we need to do to finish, have the ball finish at the back of the pocket where we want it to finish? Just thought.
Yeah, I mean, that's where the ratio, we're just trying to give the data to it. The more accurate you can be on what a player has, the better you can make adjustments for it. That's probably the biggest question that I think all players go through nowadays. With the high-powered bowling balls, with different lane conditions, sometimes it can be very tricky to tell if your ball is running out of energy too early or if it's not starting up soon enough. It can be very challenging to tell. So a great way that you can kind of try and dictate that and try and test that is if you feel like your ball may be starting up too soon, where the skid phase is too short, the hook phase is beginning too early, so therefore the roll phase is starting too early. It's just out of energy. A great way to try is to stand in the same spot, throw a different bowling ball. Have the player throw a different bowling ball. A weaker type bowling ball, a ball that's naturally going to retain more energy and go a little bit longer. If that ball makes the move a little bit stronger and it increases the skid phase and sort of makes everything happen in the proper manner, well then you know that that first ball was burning up too soon. If that second ball you throw goes dead straight, then you know that your first ball wasn't burning up too soon. It was that that first ball wasn't starting up soon enough.
I wasn't talking about where it enters the pocket, where it drops off the back of the lane. That's the critical part.
Yeah.
How does it go through the pins? And seeing where it drops off the back of the lane determines whether the ball projected through the pins the way we intended.
Yeah, that's where the release ratio comes into effect. Whether we're getting the ball into the roll. So if it's deflecting off, it's one of two things. It's either starting too soon or it's going too long. So if you lower the ball speed and it makes it worse, it means it wasn't going too long. It means it was starting too soon. If you raise it and it makes it worse, then it means it was going too long because you've actually made it worse. So it's all trial and error. I mean, it's not something that you can say, well, this is happening, boom, fix, gold 300, gold medals all around. Yeah, we love it. You know, it's not that simple. There's lots of times where, you know, we as coaches make the wrong decision. We think something's happening, and you know what? We went the wrong way. So let's flip-flop the other way.
Yeah, it's always an educated guess. And one thing, and maybe to answer your question too, is that sometimes just listen to the pins. You know, if you hear the pins really cracking, but the ball's deflected to the right, most likely it didn't get into a roll. But if you see it deflected right and it just has no crack to it, just very muffled sound, you can pretty much say that it's dead on the right. So sometimes the pins, listen to the pins, watch what the pins are doing, and give you that information. Okay, thank you everybody.
What I handed out to you guys, just a few handouts for you guys, is with the release ratio, I gave you some generalizations about release ratio. It doesn't mean everybody's going to fit perfectly into that perfect little box of the sheets, but some general characteristics of release ratios as to the numbers and where people fit, you know, generally what type of pattern they're going to hold well on, where they may struggle, certain stuff like that. I also gave you like a layout, you know, a ball drill, like what type of ball would be better for people with specific type of ratios. And then lastly, I gave you what we give out here in the training center to track someone's release versatility. That's just like a made-up Joe Bowler one. I named he or she Chris Smith. I figured the most gender equity name would be Chris. So I picked Chris Smith as a good, it could be a male or female. And just some of the versatility things that we look at here in the training center about how much you can change rotation, how much you can change RPMs, and what that does to changing release ratios. So once again, thank you very much. I appreciate your time, and it was a pleasure jumping in.
10-minute break. I know we scheduled usually 15, but let's try to get 10.